Yeah, so the goal of this session is just to have an open discussion about anything that you want related to FHIR or related to standards. We can just ask, what are you worried about FHIR or working on with FHIR, or success stories or concerns, anything. We can look at specific areas of FHIR, specific projects. It's really an open discussion, so there's no agenda. Please feel free to jump in with any topics, or we can just go around and see who has anything to discuss. Sorry, I forgot to put on my camera. Hi, everyone. So we have a couple of participants, 10 participants. So it's the time to feel free to speak up. Anyone is doing FHIR implementations at this moment, or people are still getting on board and learning about FHIR? Is there anyone in the participants in the chat starting or implementing FHIR at this moment? I think I'll ask. I'll call people by their names, because I don't recognize the names here. I do not know. Oh, I recognize one name. Hi, Alvin. Yeah, people are joining still. Hey. Oh, Masuma, thank you very much for your message. You're learning. We might take that. Learning about FHIR is a very popular topic nowadays. I do not know if everyone is learning. So everyone that's joining this chat, if everyone is learning about FHIR, I am. But if people want to share their experience with how it is to learn FHIR, or where you're learning FHIR from, and how are you managing it, and what anything that you notice besides the fact that there's never enough FHIR trainings and FHIR events. What else is some would you say about your onboarding experience, or any other topics, as I said? Suma, I did not want to single you out, but if you want to just to mention, if you're still there, yeah, if you're still there, your experience, where are you learning from, and how are you learning it? I guess not. So maybe I can bring up a few things. So again, since this is without an agenda, allow me to just bring up some topics. I'm here in Amsterdam in the Dev Days. We had lots of sessions about lots of things about FHIR, like FHIR versions, and how do we manage now the transition to the new version of FHIR that came out 3 months ago, almost 3 months ago. And translation of FHIR, so multilingual content in FHIR. I just joined a session on CQL, also very interesting, very technical, very interesting. Yeah, lots of topics. But I see, Rupshan, you have your hand up. Please speak up.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. So, hello. I just have a question now. We are starting to implement FHIR here in Sri Lanka. So we have set up our FHIR server, and we are done some initial profiling, and we are in the stage of slowly implementing FHIR. So since we started profiling around 1.5 years ago, the version was 4. And in March, they have released version 5. So since we are on the stage of implementing, currently I think most of the systems are still at 4 and 4B. So should we start implementing 4 or 4B, or should we move on to 5? Because there were some new resources added in 5, as well as some existing elements in version 4 has been changed in 5. So it would be great if you can share your experience whether to go for 5 or start with 4. Thank you.
Thank you. can I ask why 4B? So you said you mentioned R4 and R4B, if I heard you correctly. Why was the 4B?
No, I mean, when we started profiling, we started using 4, and then I think around 1 year ago or so, 4B rolled out, and in March, now version 5 is here. So should we move on to 5 straight away, or since we are at the beginning of implementing and we haven't done the real data exchange, so should we adopt 5 from the get-go, or should we stay on 4? Because currently, I think most of the systems are still using 4. Yes.
Awesome discussion. I can actually share some thoughts on this. The topic indeed versions and how to manage multi-versions, and the fact that you start with one version and then by the time you finish your profiles, there's a new version of FHIR. So what do we do there? This is an interesting and important area. So I can share some of the ideas that are being discussed out here from the best of my knowledge. And yeah, we can go there. If you allow me, before we do that, because that can give us quite some talking topics. Anything else that people are looking into from FHIR, around FHIR, about their experience with FHIR? Any other topics? I guess not. So the R4 and R4B and R5 discussion. So as I was just saying, yeah, the moment that you finish your profiles, your technology is already outdated because there's a new version of FHIR. Technically, this is good because things are improving, but it's really not a good thing. It's always a mess because then we have to see what we need to change and what happens. So there's a couple of things. At this moment, most of us have it easy because we don't yet have data in R4 or R5. So we are still prototyping and defining the specifications, and the data is out there still in an old database, so it's not yet stored in a FHIR vault. Some of us have already experienced that, okay, now I store my data in R4 format. How am I going to get the data in R5? Because my server is a happy server, and the happy server is a FHIR storage, so it stores the data as it should be. Oh, sorry, as it should be in FHIR. If you want to take advantage of that, so the JPA starter and built-in database of happy and not as a facade. If you want to do that, then yeah, you have now two databases, two slightly different databases. They have a similar behavior, but their data is different, or their data structures are different. So I'm going to talk about the easy part of that. So the easy part is that you have to maintain somehow a roadmap. You have to see which versions do we want to support until when. So do we support R4? Do we support R4, R4B, and R5? For how long? Do we support overlapping versions? Do we support R4 and R5 at the same time? By the way, R4B was good for introduce a couple of specific things. Unless you have a need for anything specific in R4B, which I don't think any one of us has, I would not do R4B. The biggest change in R4B was introduction of a codable concept, which for itself is not really powerful enough. I mean, it's really interesting, but it's not really something that would motivate a business impactful change. The other thing was the medication regulatory resources in R4B, but actually they did not work well in R4B. So people that are doing that, they are also using R5. So and R4B was not fully supported in several aspects of happy. If you have the idea, so if you have the concept of starting with R4 and then eventually migrate to R5, which is what many countries are, or many organizations are doing, because there is already a lot of knowledge in R4 and it's relatively stable. We already went through 3 years of profiling, etc. Then you'll have, so you have to maintain this roadmap, and you also have to manage the data migration or the data compatibilities. If you store your data in a R4 format, then how do you handle the R5 format, or how do you handle the R5 needs of data? Let me see. There was another. Yeah. So and within this, there comes one question. If you start having storage of data, you put one patient in the database in R4, and then 2 years later you want to get it, but by the time the database is R5. If you have two databases, then you have different patients in different databases. That I don't think that's really what anyone wants, unless you have a very purpose-specific database and you have a very small scope, and your data is not really going to be reusable, which is pretty much not what we want. We want data to be reusable and shared everywhere. So yeah, if you have a database in R4 and you have any data there, then eventually you will want to have some migration plan for migrating your own data into R5. So recommending, it's not just beginning discussions that several people are having, is the following. As you do this, please consider that, and this is, I mean, my limited recommendation is, your data will be in one format, in one technology. When you migrate, it's going to be another technology formats, slightly different syntax. From my perspective, I say that it's the database owner's problem. So in a friendly sense, like, it's your problem now. You chose the storage model. You chose your storage model to be FHIR, so you hang on to that. Now it's your problem. So if you have patients coming in R5 format and patients coming in R4 format through another endpoint, it's your problem. How do you reconcile the data? How do you fit the gaps, fill in the gaps that maybe R5 needs and R4 did not have? That's really something that the database owners have to have, which will bring me to another topic that's also kind of emerging here, which is, what is that data format? The fact that you have to design your data not for a current technology, that is also important. So I'll stop here to hear some feedback, to see if this is, Rukshan, addressing your concerns, or if you want me to go deeper in any of these topics.
Hello, yes. The summary is that since we don't have any data currently stored, we can straight away go for R5. I think I got it correct.
I think Jose dropped off. We'll just give him a minute or so to rejoin. In the meantime, if you have any questions, you can drop them in the chat. So when he's back, we can pick it up.
Hello? I'm so sorry. Are you still there?
Yes, yes, we're still here, Jose.
I lost connection and somehow I could not reconnect back. I'm so sorry.
No worries.
So going back to the topic, Rukshan, what was the conclusion? Sorry, could you repeat your response? I missed most of it.
Yeah, so as I understood, since we don't have since we don't have any data and we are starting from the beginning, it is better to start with R5. And if a system or country already has data stored in R4, then they should have a roadmap on migrating to R5. So I think I got it correct. Is that the summary?
Any legacy issues? Okay, everyone. Because it's something that I really
Jose, you could be an audible. Okay.
I'm back again.
Yep.
I'm so sorry. So I was suggesting something just to continue the discussion. Is that an interesting thing? So the data storage model, is that an interesting thing? Hello?
Hey, Jose, we're here.
Yeah, no, I was asking,
think-
is it an interesting thing to so I assume you can hear me well now, right?
Yes, yeah, you're audible.
So I was cutting off my video to get the best internet connection, but I couldn't still do it, but now I should be okay. So the fact that you have different FHIR versions, different ways of expressing the data, that's actually just a technical problem. So you can actually say, as long as the data is well stored, technically should be able to export it in different formats. The minor issue there is that we chose, or it chose in this case, to use a storage model that is technology independent. So that brings you the challenges that you're having now, that you will be having in that situation. So some considerations there from my side, and just again, this is just for discussion. When we do profiles, and if you have seen our webinars, especially the one with the implementation guide, we have always a step of modeling our data. So we go through our data and say, this is an implementation guide. This is the data that we want. We capture a logical data model. This is extremely important and actually shows up here. If you capture your data for what it clinically means, you can design your database around it, and the rest becomes just a technical format. But if you design your data only according to what FHIR currently does, then you're subject to any changes that are not expected that FHIR will introduce, and you might have some issues. So if you define your data model in a way that is independent of a specific FHIR release, you should be better off in terms of how to manage your roadmaps. Here's an example. Suppose that today you capture your, I don't know, not patient, your allergies or your vaccination. If you capture your vaccination and if you use R4, in FHIR R4, the code for the vaccine is kind of a mix between the code of the product and the code of the vaccine itself. So because MMR is one type of product which is 3 diseases, but it's the shot that you give at a given point in time for a person. In R5, those are different attributes. So you have the target disease and you have the product or the product type that you give. Now, suppose that you want to do some decision support on this, or you want to do something with that data, you want to do inventory management or whatever. And if you have those things as one single data element, then your job is a bit more difficult. However, if your data model says these are different things, and then in FHIR, if you had put those in extensions or whatever in R4, then that specific migration, for example, now, when I've gone through it, it becomes extremely easy because one thing was an extension, now it's a FHIR attribute or vice versa, but you can still have the same data because it's your data model. Especially with national things or purpose-specific data elements, it's really useful to define your data model from a perspective of the data that you need, functionally first, technically then, and then use FHIR as a transport or as a way to contain that data. This is what I've seen from implementing different FHIR versions. So if you go for FHIR storage, be careful, because you will always have the problem of migrating from R4 to R5 or from R5 to R6. It will always happen. It's not, you're not going to be able to choose one specific final version, and then that's it. And if you do that, my stronger recommendation is, define your data model. Define the data that you clinically need, that you clinically want in your system. This is typically something that it's not a technical person that will do this. This is something that will exist in the Ministry of Health or in the project management. Someone that has the topic or that drives the project or drives the need for data storage and data exchange would have those requirements implicit or explicit. But if you have that definition, it really helps, because then you have the migration becomes much easier. For example, vaccine code is actually the code of the product and the code of the disease. If you have those things clear up front, then your migration will be much easier. I don't know if this is relating or if this is resonating with anyone. Is this something that people find interesting or find useful? I found it useful, especially when I had to see a project that did not do their data models, and they had much bigger problems in migrating between versions, which they are planning to do now. Is this relatable?
I think it's relatable to us because we haven't considered that aspect, like creating a data model independent of the FHIR version. So that's something new, and that's something that definitely we're going to discuss and consider, because like you said, it will reduce our friction and the FHIR versions change in the future.
Yeah. By the way, this is also what the WHO SMART guidelines use. So, and I mentioned this because the SMART guidelines, they are a very powerful, I expect them to be a very powerful driving force of adopting certain aspects of FHIR or adopting FHIR in a certain way. And what the SMART guidelines do is they take something that is a PDF, then they structure their data needs, and then it goes to implementation, which means that if in your country you have different data needs, don't bother with immediately transforming the technical layer, because you still have to clarify your data needs. For example, if you have simple case, HIV infection. If you want to monitor HIV infection and one of your target populations is related to sexual orientation, for example, if that would be this one stratifier, and this is just a hypothetical example, you will most likely encounter places where, no, this is not the data stratifier that we want to do, because this will be a political issue. It's going to be all over the news, and we really don't want that. So if you want to have this kind of national decisions or local decisions on the data, you can. But the moment that you do this, the technical implementation of the data will change. So in our terms, once the data model changes, then your and or your terminologies will change slightly, then your implementation that is based on those terminologies and those data models will, of course, also need to be checked to see if it changes as well. Ideally, we want this as automated as possible, but meaning that your national model will be different from other national models. That is fine. And if you capture this, what your data needs, then you are even a bit more immune to that. So you actually capture your data for what you want. And then you can say, okay, now it goes into FHIR 4 or now it goes into FHIR 5. Or now I can compare this with what the WHO recommends or with what OpenHIE has recommendations. Those are the data needs that you can then use and use that as a pilot, as a pivot. So this is I have piloted these things and it really works well in the sense that it empowers the people on the clinical side to own their data definitions. So SMEs, experts, not so much policymakers, but people from the ministry that want to make sure that there is consistency around the data, especially the people that are then taking the statistics and the analytics. If you put this in place, you empower those people to own the data from a business clinical perspective. And that's the truth. And that is not going to change that often. In practice, it's going to be changed very often in the first few months. But after that, you can have three releases of FHIR and your data is not going to change much because clinical reality does not change. What changes is what what the uses you make of the data, what other technologies are possible, but then you don't need to rediscuss with clinicians again. Yeah, and then if you have a new version of FHIR or two versions of FHIR, or interestingly as well, you have today my version 1 of my profiles that are based in FHIR 4, and then I have my version 2 of the same profiles but are still based in R4. So it's not only the version of the FHIR-based specification, is the version of each of the layers that you have. If you have seen the webinars, I always put this in layers. So there's a base layer, which is FHIR, and there's your national layer, there's your project layer. Each of these layers will have their own life cycle. So FHIR changes like every 2.5 years. There's a new release of FHIR. We are expecting that. Then your national layer might change once a year, maybe more often. Then you have your project layer, which at the beginning will change much more quickly. Those are technical layers, but also the data layer. So, and the basic model of FHIR is pretty much the same. Your national data structures will be very stable, I guess. And yeah, and I think that will help in your migration path. And then if you have to change from R4 to R5, and if you have your pivot model, which is your abstract model, then that becomes a bit more simple. I hope it still makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. It's great insight. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question, and thank you for giving me a pretext to talk about these things, because this is actually causing some pain in some places. I see Meenakshi, if I'm correctly pronouncing your name. I think this is the question. Is it recommended to store the data in FHIR format or to convert the data FHIR only when required? It's up to you. You can, so FHIR is kind of a object storage. You store objects, you store resources. If that works for you, go ahead. You have lots of people that are doing this, lots of advantages in reusing the technology. If you have a system that already has a database, or if you really want to be strict about your database not being FHIR or CDA specific or whatever, then you have a database, and then you do FHIR as a facade. It really depends on the project that you have. So if you have a new project, if I have a new project, I would say, let me just store the data for, at least for a pilot, I would go for storing data in FHIR format. After that, I would come up with this plan of saying, okay, I really need to have my models very clear. I really need to have my storage in a way that it can work throughout different versions of FHIR. So that should be kind of built in from the beginning. But as long as I have data storage, object storage around FHIR, if that is what I start with, that's fine. However, if I have a database that's there serving hospitals for 20 years and I want to plug in FHIR to that, I would not. make a system that just replaces that and go in production directly or quickly. I would be very careful because that data is that data. If you are lucky, the data is documented and it has a specific meaning that might not be the same meaning as in FHIR, so you might have to do some tweaking there. But in most cases, the data will be there, but it's not going to be documented in a national data model. It's going to be documented in the SQL tables that you have there. So in my experience, there might be a lot of guesswork. There's a big possibility that you have to spend a lot of time guessing what the data is. You always have to go through that analysis, but if you have the data, I would personally say, yeah, I will not sacrifice the integrity of the data as it is because we have a new interface. If, however, you have a program, a national program that is, let's clean up our data, then maybe again I would start considering storing data in FHIR. It really depends on the scope that you have. I mean, actually, I don't know if that answers your concern or if that only makes it worse. If so, I'm sorry, but that's kind of how these things are at this moment. Yeah. Yeah, it really depends on so please feel empowered to say, yeah, I have this. My concern is, so I mean, if you're on the technology side, feel empowered to kick back and say, we need to know what data we want. The rest is, if I'm in a technical conversation, I'll say, the rest, don't worry, I got it. We can take care of this. But what we need is to have an agreement on what data we are talking about. If it's R4 or R5, clinicians, SMEs should not really worry too much about this. It's a technical thing. And then you have your fun, with the different resources and extensions, etc. But yeah, so if you're piloting something, just use an R5 database. I'm happy. It has lots of new features. It's relatively stable. R6 is going to change, but not too much. So I would go there. What else? What other topics do we want to bring up? What other concerns? So I spoke about I touched a lot of topics here. Anything that triggers any thoughts, any ideas, any additional conversations? Anyone doing anything? Anyone doing anything specific? Yeah, go on.
Hi. If you can help, I know you have already covered, but if you can help, how do we handle the DICOM images, because they are very huge in size.
Oh, right.
So that if you can help me understand, because we have not yet started doing that, but we do intend to cover as part of ABDM that also.
Good question. So there's quite some work being done or done already on FHIR and DICOM, in the sense that DICOM is a stable standard. They even have a new thing called WADO, Web Access to Data Objects, I think, or something like this. So it's the kind of the FHIR version of DICOM. DICOM is a very old and well-established standard. So they started a long time ago when there was no web access, no web services. But if you have those two standards talking in terms of web services, that's nice, but you need to see how they are put together. So I hope every one of us has an account in the chat.fhir.org system. So that's where most people exchange the ideas and questions like this. Imaging is actually one of the areas that I was involved in, but I'm no longer that involved in anymore because just there's too many things I need to catch up with. But I think there's a good body of knowledge, and I'm just going to search. Actually, I can actually do that with you. So let me just share with you. If I get a difficult question or a question that I'm not really knowledgeable about, I will just quickly share my screen if you don't mind. So I go to chat.fhir.org and I look for DICOM, and I see who is doing this? Okay, so FHIR logical model instances, DICOM metadata extension. This is on implementer stream. So there's a couple of references to DICOM. Well, there's something called medical imaging. I might do this. And then there is, for example, diagnostic report for FHIR examples for imaging report. Let me see what is there. It's a whole discussion, I guess, a few months ago. And there's a couple of people there discussing this. Oh, there's not answers there. Let's see it. Let's go back to the search. So in this case, because I'm a bit caught off guard with the question, thank you for that, is actually I will just say, who's discussing DICOM in the chat, in the FHIR chat. And I just happen to know some names, and I will go to see if they are online. And if they are online, I'll just say, hey, what's happening here? Can you give me a pointer there? Which means if you don't know anyone else in the chat of FHIR, ping me, ask me and say, oh, do you know anyone that's doing this? And then I would say, I don't, I know exactly who might be doing this. And that's it. So not answering your question, but trying to give some answer to your question. There is some, as you can see here from my screen, there is some work around FHIR and DICOM. There is some, so there are some initiatives, there's some overlap. FHIR and DICOM, basically, now I can say what the very little I know, which is, so DICOM is to contain images. So you typically do FHIR imaging requests. So the risk part would be on FHIR. So the imaging procedures and the ordering of those procedures, the preparation, even the radiopharmaceuticals that you might need for those, the imaging procedures, not radiopharmaceuticals, the imaging contrasts and all these things, you might need those you might do that on FHIR, so all that would be on FHIR. And then DICOM would have images exchange, and then FHIR would be just pointing to DICOM objects. So that's pretty much what I would expect. Let me see. Here's a reference example. So there's the document reference in the diagnostic models of FHIR, which says this is a document reference resource. So there's a resource in FHIR called the document reference, which is basically when you receive the report back from the imaging, you know, let me just go back. So without giving a full functional analysis of this, here's what I would expect to have. And what I'm now going to do is pretty much identifying the key data objects, like if we were modeling our data. We have, so it's an imaging procedure. So I would have a service request. Service request, okay, then I go, okay, for a service request, and here basically I would put the order details and I would the code of if I need to put some contrast, what contrast I would put. I would say the code of the procedure. I would say I want I don't know, abdominal CT scan. There should be all the data will be there in FHIR. And then at the end you have a diagnostic report. So when the result comes, report, this is the one part of FHIR that you can just navigate the resources. And then in the diagnostic report, you can actually have pointers to. So if there's, you see here, so you have a diagnostic report that has a status, like when was this report issued, what's the status, is it the final report, etc., and a pointer to media. And in the media, you have a link, which is a reference to a document reference resource. And the document reference resource is nothing but a wrapper of something else. And that something else is actually what we were seeing here with the DICOM. So you have a DICOM image that is referenced, or that is wrapped in a document reference file resource, which is used in the diagnostic report. That is pretty much how it would work. So I did not want to enter, the actual precise object, because I don't know if your question was very to this point or more generic. How do you use DICOM? So those standards will exist. Most likely you'll have the procedural part, which is FHIR, and the imaging part. So just the image content part, which is DICOM, and you reference one with the other by saying, this is a binary object. This is FHIR, and you can always find the binary object over there through this document reference that I'm just providing you. Actually, this is the this is a better thing. And then you have the imaging there in the Windows server, so in the DICOM thing. So here's the wrapper with all the things that need to be known from the image. And here's the actual image there, a link to the image. Does that work?
Yes, thank you. I think I'll have to read through this better to understand better. Thank you so much. I've copied the links.
Yeah.
I'll read through
yes,
that. Yeah.
And apologies for not. I mean, I do not know if your story was that. This is the basics. But ping me or anyone else in the chat.FHIR.org. If you don't have an account, or if you did not have an account 3 minutes ago when I started talking, I hope you have one now. But yeah, there's lots of things like you see here, diagnostic dose summary or radiation dose summary, also in a more advanced area. So if you have these things, these problems, bring them always to the chat.FHIR.org. You can come there with very beginner questions. If you don't find anything, you just go to the implementer stream. Like I have a problem implementing this, or to the social stream, or just ping anyone, from the let me just ping this part of it, from this part here, like all the people in the community will be online, and you can just choose who am I going to ask this question, and then you just ask anyone. If you don't have anyone else to know, like, in a big party, you don't know anyone yet, just tag along with the first person you recognize, and the rest will happen anyway. So yeah, just use the community, please.
Yes, we'll certainly do that. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you for the question. And thank you for the interest in DICOM. I think it's really important that we also start rolling out concrete implementations of imaging with FHIR. Any other topics, any other things that people are doing, are worried about, are expecting? No one is requesting FHIR trainings, which is unusual. Because every time we have a meeting, people are like, when do we have more FHIR trainings? Let me ask a general question and people can pick it up. How is the FHIR training situation in your context, in your countries, in your environment? How is it going? Anyone have anything to report?
Yeah, if I can go first. Actually, we are working for the Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission project in India. So here what we try to do is the healthcare providers, many of them, they are aware, but most of them they do not have awareness around the HL7 standards. So what we do here in the project is that we try to organize the FHIR trainings at our level also, and here it is in India it is maintained by, there's an organization called NRCES. They maintain the entire all the FHIR formats and all for this ABDM project, like generating the profiles, the HI types. Like we have templates defined for, if you can just type on Google ABDM and FHIR, the first page which you get on the hit. So I think that is, or you can even type just nrcs.org. That's right. So they do organize trainings, and we also collaborate with them, and we also organize trainings. In fact, we have uploaded a lot of webinars that we keep doing it on a regular basis. And I think now quite a lot of integrators are pretty comfortable, though they find some understanding gaps initially, but once they are clear with how the template works, how the resources are, how the profiles are set, I think then that solves the problem. But yes, it's just the tip of the iceberg. Actually, the entire pyramid is still left to create awareness for this FHIR format, because since it's a mandatory requirement to follow this standard in our project, because that is how you will initiate the data transfer. So yes, there's no other way, but they have to implement this. So maybe it will take a little time, but yes, eventually it will be done here in India.
Sorry, I was muted. Awesome. So a couple of quick reactions. First of all, it's very important something that you said there, which is it becomes mandatory. It is mandatory in the country. So while we were only mostly talking about the technology side of FHIR and the database formats and the data formats, etc., the FHIR technical aspects, that is what we want to master now, but there's much more to this. A few months ago, we started looking at the FHIR trainings and the needs for FHIR awareness. And I personally realized that it's not only about technology, it's much more than that. It's about standards. So if you can solve something with DICOM, don't try to solve it in FHIR. Or if something is working in HL7 version 2 and you don't really want to change those systems because they are old, but they are still working lab machines, then don't force it. And then it's a bit of, besides standards, it's a bit of digital health, where we have not only the knowledge of the technologies, but also things like you might want to do something that's technologically interesting, but there is privacy, there is people's security at risk. And whereas in many other areas we can afford bugs, in healthcare it's something that we really don't want. Those bugs to be uncontrolled. You always have bugs, but hopefully they don't kill anyone. There's also aspects of security for which we have a growing body of knowledge there. So some of the things that I try to do when I discuss FHIR trainings is to say it's not only the technology. And if you only have the technology in your hands or mastered in your team, then you will quickly realize that, yeah, we need more than this. We need governance. So, and one of those things is who decides that this is mandatory. So I'm happy that you already have gone through this. So someone has already said, for several reasons, yeah, this is what's going to happen. We are sticking to FHIR. And it really helps if someone has decided that, because then the discussion is not about which technology is better, my technology or your technology. It really becomes easy to just focus on the work. So that was one thing. So the fact that you have policymakers kind of aware that FHIR, for example, does not replace SNOMED or LOINC, whatever. It's a different type of standard. But FHIR can replace version 2 of HL7, but doesn't mean that it should replace everywhere, because sometimes you have systems that are working fine, and if you just make a FHIR front end to report the lab results at the very end, let the machines talk to each other as they are talking now, and then you will make a FHIR summary out of that. So it's important to gain that awareness, I guess. So that is one of the things that you mentioned there that was clear. And the other thing, just because you triggered me, I like this. I think I had seen this already, this implementation guide. Please stay tuned to the community and to chat.fhir.org. I'm going to make a small video that explains how do you transform this thing. So I'm looking at this implementation guide, and this box here, it means that this is local development build. So normally, and I'll show you one example, just for you to be aware. So this is just one of the things that it's not a call to action, it's just a call for awareness. We will support the community as we can. Let me just wait for this.
I have a question. By the time you're displaying this, you mentioned that there's a possibility that FHIR can be replaced. SNOMED it might replace SNOMED, LOINC, and other standards. But
no,
actually here
it does not. It does not.
Yeah. Then fine. Then yes, because it is actually inbuilt, right? I use the codes, and that's how my data becomes structured. If I'm not using the LOINC or standard, right.
Yeah, so sorry if I was not clear or if I misspoke. Yeah, it's important that for decision makers, FHIR level decision makers, not to understand what the JSON is and what are the intrinsic keys, I don't know how to say the word, sorry, of the FHIR searching mechanism. They don't have to know this. What they have to know is that data is available in a common language, in a common format. Takes a lot of work, takes a lot of investment to get people on board, to get expertise, to roll out the projects. And that it's not the miracle solution that replaces all the terminologies. If a country has subscription to Snowman, it's very good. They should use Snowman, and then there is, of course, modeling work to be done. I just wanted to share this thing, so just to show you how it looks like. So this is one implementation guide, so one specification, the one I just thought of now. And you see this yellow box here. It says this is page part of the structured data capture. This is the current published version. For a full list, see the directory of published versions, which is what I had here. The fact that that box doesn't say this is the local build, or for example, this is the current build. So this is not authorized. This is the continuous build for version, etc. So the fact that it doesn't say simply this is the local build, this means that this has been correctly published. Correctly published is actually a process. Somewhat complicated. That's why I will make a 5-10 minute video to explain the basics, and then the rest is automatic. But there's one thing that matters to you, which is if you are making this publication, and this is a base. So if you have a national implementation like you have here, and now if you need the tools to be this, for example, let me see what you have here in terms of artifacts. Where do you have a link to the artifacts? I'll find it. Oh, you remove you remove the artifacts index. Okay. Yeah, so if you have this, let me see if you have files. Oh, there's terminology here, sorry. So if you have this, if you have a code system, and if you, for example, if you have a tool that needs to validate this code system and fetch the code system, normally the tools will use URLs for this. And at this moment, you might have some issues with some of the tools that do this by the URL, because this URL resolves for us. So if I go on a browser, it should resolve. Oh, well, it doesn't. Okay, so there's a problem right there. So there are some things that are added when you run through the final publication process. This is just to say, stay tuned. I will share the publication process of FHIR implementation guides in a short video, so that you don't have to listen to me for too long. With just the basics of this is how you do it. Put this there, you set this variable there, and then you have a website. So pretty much your website that you have here, the content of that, which is exactly like this one, but with a history page like the other one that I showed here automatically. So this the whole thing gets automatically built, and then you add a new version, and this history table gets appended. The next year you do the same, and then there's another version. So this is automatic. You just have to know how to use it. And most important, it enables that machine readable consultation of your resources. If you have one system that needs to do an expansion on a value set, if the value set is published in your IG and not in a terminology server, you might need the tooling to get there. This has to do with redirects and so web server redirects and all these things. It's a bit complicated, but it's all under the surface. There's just a couple of configuration that you have to do and then publish, and the whole thing then becomes automated. So this is just for you to be aware that many IGs are in this phase, and we are trying to push this to the full cycle of FHIR implementation guide publication, which is the final publication that brings this kind of thing. And the symptom, as I showed, is this box looks different. This is kind of showing what's the stage of your publication process. I hope this was okay. I mean, this is not to be seen as there's something missing. No, it's fine, but we need to work towards making this even easier so that the tools can pick it up.
Oh, I'm sorry, but can you help me understand what is the importance for this URL? It's not working, but
yeah, if you're a tool like a JavaScript library, that's a FHIR JavaScript library that needs to say, oh, I need to see if the identifier type code is valid. If I'm using the right codes there, then the tool would go to this URL, and this URL actually does not resolve. So, and then the tool will say, I cannot validate. It's just that. I mean, the rest is just prettier publication, I guess. But this is the part that matters, that tools cannot look up your resources, therefore they cannot validate, and you cannot automate more beyond that.
So do you mean to say that when I use my, I have if I use my FHIR template, one of the FHIR template, any one I can take, and if we do have FHIR validators. So the error what we get or the warnings or information is because of this URL not working?
I don't know if the errors that you have is because of this, but this is likely to cause you some errors. Doesn't necessarily mean that the whole thing is going to explode, but it means that sometimes you might have some validation issues that are simply caused by the fact that actually, let me try this. Let me see if you have. So normally all the IGs have a QA report. Let's see if this one has everything in green, or most of them. Oh, this one actually has everything in green. But sometimes there are some issues, and it's simply because the code system could not be checked because it was not there. So if you make an implementation guide for something else that uses the identifier type codes, and you need to validate that. So if you make an IG on top of this one, that's pretty much the case. If you make an IG on top of this one, and that IG needs to validate if the codes are being correctly filled in, depends on how you configure your infrastructure. You might have some issues in validation. Normally you shouldn't. The tools are getting more and more robust, but you might have some issues because you didn't follow the publication. And besides, there's a FHIR registry. There's a list of all the implementation guides ever published by anyone, and maybe this is not your implementation guide is not there yet. So awareness, tooling support, those are the reasons why we should always follow the publication process until the end. Don't worry, we will. It's just a thing that takes like half an hour to run the scripts, but it's simple. But just to raise awareness that there's something else coming for you.
Okay.
I meant it as good news.
Okay. Thank you. This makes me realize I know nothing. I need to read more.
No, sorry, that's exactly what I did not mean. No, it means that you've done a lot. I guess I would.
No, I'm still learning, so it's okay. I'm still learning.
No, I think that like 80% of the implementations that I've seen, big projects, except for the big ones, the ONC ones in the US, the HL7 ones in some countries. Actually, most countries are still struggling with this thing, or they did not go through this because the tooling kind of takes care of most of it. And it's just one small thing that it's really easy, but it becomes part of the process. So you're not in the beginning; you're actually in the not the top percentile, but above the average, because this is something that is until recently it was very complicated, so people just abandoned it, and it really is. And the tooling can really cover most of it, so you're fine. I just noticed, that this clearly means that we need to do something to publish. Better just for the tooling to be fully supported there. Because if you say now, I cannot do validation. One question that I would ask is, did you publish your implementation guide as a release? If not, I say, okay, then it might be from that there's a problem. If you don't have problems, you're fine. In a few days, you should be able to publish the whole thing. And as I said, like 80% of organizations are not publishing it because it was complicated. Okay, so thank you for this topic, though. Thank you for engaging. Anything else that anyone wants to discuss? We are out of time, actually. But is there anything that we should pick up quickly? If not, I would wish you the rest of a good day. And I hope that next time we meet, everyone has a chat.fhir.org account. If you don't have it yet, let's meet there and stay well and see you around soon. Thank you all. Bye-bye.